There comes a moment not marked by thunder or applause, but by a gentle unraveling within, when the soul grows weary of its own resistance. A moment when all the striving, the proving, the endless reaching begins to feel like a foreign language the heart no longer wishes to speak. And in that holy pause, when the noise of the world begins to dim, a quiet whisper rises from the depths of your being, a whisper that does not demand, but invites, a whisper that says, let go. Not as a defeat, but as a return. For surrender is not the giving up of effort, it is the giving up of the illusion that effort is what creates worth. It is the sacred act of unclenching your fist from the rope you've been gripping, not realizing the burns it left on your palms were not a sign of loyalty to life, but resistance to it. You have spent years believing that control was your safety, that by holding on tightly, you could prevent life from taking what you love. But the truth is, love cannot be held, peace cannot be chased, freedom cannot be bargained for. These are not prizes handed to the most vigilant, they are birthrights, unveiled only when you stop trying to earn what was always yours. To surrender is to fall back into the arms of something that has been carrying you all along. It is to stop standing guard at the gates of your own heart and allow grace to walk in, not as a stranger, but as the very essence of who you are. For the universe does not ask you to be perfect. It does not ask you to have all the answers. It only asks that you be available, that you be willing to be met, not with performance, but with presence, not with striving, but with stillness. The Tao Te Ching whispers, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. And so many of us have misunderstood this becoming. We have imagined it as becoming more accomplished, more worthy, more enlightened. But the Tao knew the becoming it speaks of is not an addition but a subtraction, a peeling away, a dissolving of what is false until only what is eternal remains. And what remains is love. Not the kind sung about in fleeting songs or wrapped in conditions, but the ancient, unshakable current of existence itself. That which existed before your first breath and will remain after your last. That which you were never separate from, except in your own forgetting. When you surrender, you stop swimming upstream against the flow of life and allow the river to carry you, not to a place of passivity, but to a place of divine cooperation. You begin to see that life is not your adversary, but your mirror. It reflects not what you command, but what you are. The ego will fight this truth. It will call surrender weakness. It will say, if I stop pushing, I will lose everything. But listen closely, the voice that tells you to resist is the same voice that told you long ago that you were not enough. That voice is not truth. It is the echo of fear, inherited from a world addicted to control. The soul knows better. The soul knows that the universe does not punish surrender, it responds to it. Like a lover waiting for the moment you let your guard down, the universe rushes in the moment you release the illusion that you must do it all alone. And suddenly, things begin to unfold, not because you forced them, but because you aligned with them. Not because you pushed harder, but because you softened. This is not the path of the world, it is the path of awakening. It is the moment the caterpillar stops resisting the cocoon and begins to dissolve. The moment the night surrenders to the dawn. The moment the flower opens, not with effort, but with allowance. And you, beautiful soul, are that flower. You are not here to hold your breath until it's safe to bloom. You are here to exhale, to open, to trust that what you are becoming is already written in the stars that watched you come into being. The universe is not a cold, indifferent force. It is the breath in your lungs, the rhythm in your heart, the intelligence that orchestrates galaxies and still makes time to whisper love into your soul. But it cannot speak through noise. It waits for the stillness, for the pause, for the moment you say, I don't know the way, but I'm willing to be led. And in that willingness, everything begins to shift. Because when you surrender, you don't lose control. You transcend the illusion that you ever had it. You stop trying to write the script of your life and start trusting the author. You begin to see that the delays were not denials, they were preparations. That the closed doors were not rejections, they were redirections. That the pain was not punishment, it was the cracking open of a heart too guarded to feel its own divinity. Surrender is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of a deeper one. It is where the spiritual path ceases to be a philosophy and becomes a living experience. Where prayer is no longer words, but a way of being. Where each breath becomes a communion and each moment a miracle. And in this sacred space of surrender, something ancient awakens. You begin to remember what you forgot, that you are not a fragmented being reaching toward the divine. You are the divine, reaching toward remembrance. You are not separate. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are the wave, forgetting it is the ocean. And when you remember, when you feel that remembrance, not as a thought but as a knowing, you weep. Not from sorrow, but from recognition. From the sheer beauty of remembering that you never had to become anything to be worthy. You only had to return to love, return to trust, return to the quiet, knowing that the universe does not abandon its own creations. It only waits for them to come home. And home is not a place. It is a surrender to what has always been true. You are loved, you are held, you are enough. And the moment you surrender, the universe embraces you. And so, as the veil of resistance begins to lift, a softer truth emerges from behind the tension of your striving. It does not demand your attention with fanfare. It hums, like a melody you've always known but forgot how to sing. It arises not from the mind's calculations, but from the soul's memory, awakening like a dawn that asks nothing of the night it replaces. For in this moment of surrender, there is no longer anything to prove. There is only presence, only being, only the unshakable realization that the treasure you have long sought in distant lands has been buried in the soil of your own spirit all along. Life becomes no longer a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be entered, a dance, not choreographed by your plans, but by a deeper rhythm that plays through every leaf and stream, every pause and breath. This rhythm cannot be heard when you are running. It waits until you are still. It cannot be grasped with ambition. It responds only to openness. And the more you allow that rhythm to move through you, the more you begin to understand that your true power was never in effort, it was in alignment. Alignment with what? With the source that dreamed you into form, with the divine pulse that lives beneath every thought and beyond every fear. This is the alignment that brings miracles, not because it manipulates life, but because it restores you to the natural order of things where abundance flows not to the deserving, but to the receptive, where healing arises not through punishment, but through surrender to what island. When you stop trying to micromanage your life as though it were a fragile enterprise, you begin to trust that you were never the manager at all. You were always the witness, the channel, the participant in something infinitely wiser than your understanding. And in that trust, a new freedom arises. Not the freedom to escape difficulty, but the freedom to meet it with grace. Not the freedom from uncertainty, but the freedom to rest within it, knowing that the same force that guides the stars is guiding you too. This trust is not built overnight. It deepens like roots into the unseen soil of your being. Every moment of letting go waters those roots. Every moment of faith, even trembling faith, nourishes them. Until one day, without fanfare, you notice you are no longer living from fear. You are no longer bracing against life. You are no longer trying to survive. You are allowing yourself to live. And living does not mean grasping for more. It means meeting each moment as if it were sent from God's own hand. Every laughter, every tear, every silence. You begin to understand that the sacred is not reserved for the extraordinary. It is the thread that runs through all things, waiting only to be seen. This is the beginning of true vision, not the kind that sees with the eyes, but the kind that sees with the soul. It is the vision that looked out through the eyes of Rumi when he wrote, "What you seek is seeking you." It is the same vision that saw through Jesus when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." It is the eternal seeing the remembrance that this moment, just as it is, contains all that you've been chasing. And with this vision, even your pain becomes part of the sacred story. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin to wonder, "What is this awakening within me?" For you realize the universe is not trying to punish you, it is trying to open you. Not to more struggle, but to more truth. Not to more suffering, but to deeper compassion. Not to answers, but to presence. Presence becomes your true wealth. The ability to sit with yourself unarmored, unhurried, undefended, and know that you are safe, even when you don't feel strong. To know that the ground of your being does not shake, even when your world does. This presence is not something you create. It is something you return to again and again, each time you breathe without rushing, each time you choose trust over tension, each time you say yes to the life that is here, not the one you thought you needed. This is not spiritual theory. This is spiritual embodiment. It is the way of the mystic, the way of the child, the way of the heart. It is a truth that can only be known when everything else falls away. And when it does, when the expectations, the roles, the demands, the identity begin to dissolve, you are not left with nothing. You are left with everything, everything real, everything eternal, everything worth giving your life to. You are left with love. Not the emotional kind that waxes and wanes with mood and circumstance, but the essence that undergirds the universe itself. The love that sees no other, the love that does not seek to be earned or returned, the love that is not a verb or a feeling but a state of being, a remembering of what you are beneath the noise, a returning to the truth that you were never separate, never lost, never less than whole. And this love, this vast, silent love, is what embraces you when you surrender, not as a reward, but as a revelation. And so the revelation deepens not with clamor, but with the quiet assurance of a truth long known but newly felt. For when the layers peel away and the masks are laid gently down, you begin to see not with your eyes, but with your being. You begin to touch life from the inside out, no longer analyzing your experience, but merging with it, as the wave finally remembers it is the sea. What once felt separate now dissolves into unity. The lines between you and life, between the observer and the observed, begin to blur until they vanish altogether. And what remains is the sacred intimacy of belonging not to a group, not to a role, but to existence itself. You belong not because you've earned a place, but because you are the place. You are the space in which the whole dance unfolds. Surrender does not erase the self, it reveals it. Not the constructed self, shaped by approval and performance, but the eternal self, the one untouched by history, unshaken by failure, unmoved by praise. This self does not need defending because it cannot be harmed. It does not need validation because it is whole. It does not grasp at life because it is life, pure presence, pure awareness, pure love. And from this ground of being, your life begins to blossom not like a chore, but like a poem. Each word is chosen not out of necessity, but out of reverence. Each step is not taken to escape, but to express. You are no longer navigating by fear, but by resonance. What aligns remains. What does not gently falls away. This is the sacred shedding, the holy unraveling. The ego trembles in the face of it, for it thrives on structure, on control, on identity, but the soul rejoices. It sings in the emptiness, for it knows that what is being emptied is illusion. And in that space, something real can finally emerge. The real is not loud. It is not adorned in accolades. It does not seek applause. It breathes slowly. It moves gently. It loves without needing a reason. And when you are rooted in the real, your very presence begins to change the atmosphere around you. Not through persuasion, but through vibration. Not through effort, but through embodiment. People feel it. They may not know what has shifted, but they sense the stillness, the depth, the groundedness. You have become a lighthouse, not because you set out to be seen, but because you stopped hiding your light. You no longer wear masks to fit in. You no longer shrink to be accepted. You no longer run from your shadow, for you have learned it was never your enemy, but your teacher. And as this teaching continues to unfold, you begin to see the entire journey differently. Not as a series of missteps and detours, but as a perfectly orchestrated path back to yourself. Every fall was a bow. Every loss was a cleansing. Every heartbreak was an invitation not to close, but to open wider. This is the paradox of surrender. It feels like falling, but it is the only way to rise. It feels like death, but only to what was never truly you. It feels like losing, but what you lose are the chains that kept you from flying. You cannot know this with the mind. You must feel it with the heart, the way a flower feels the sun before it can name the light. You must trust it without proof, the way the tide trusts the pull of the moon. You must let yourself be undone, not because you are weak, but because only what is false can be undone. What is true remains. And what is true is love. Always love. Then let us breathe once more into this unfolding, for the journey of the soul is not measured by miles or milestones, but by the depth of presence it allows. And here you are, in the midst of the great remembering, not by accident, not by force, but by divine invitation. You have come to this moment not because you've conquered life, but because you've begun to trust it. You have started to see with the eyes of surrender, and what those eyes see is sacred. You begin to realize that nothing was ever truly lost. that every part of your path, each heartbreak, each uncertainty, each delay was not a mistake, but a part of the choreography that led you here, led you inward, led you home. The pain was not proof of your separation from the divine, it was the portal through which the divine could reach you. And now, with each breath that does not reach for control, with each sigh that releases the past, you are softening, opening, returning. Surrender is not a single act, it is a posture of being. It is the willingness to stand empty-handed before the mystery and say, I do not need to understand to be at peace. It is the moment when the need to explain gives way to the miracle of experience. And in that experience, something ancient within you stirs a memory not born of time but of truth. You begin to remember the song you sang before the world taught you to be silent. You begin to hear the call that has always been beneath the noise, the call not to be more but to be real. Real, not as the world defines it, but as the soul remembers it. This is not the path of self-improvement. It is the path of self-revelation. It is not the journey of becoming something new, but of unbecoming all that you are not. And the more you release old stories, borrowed beliefs, inherited fear, the more space you create for grace to enter. Grace does not need a polished altar. It needs only a willing heart. It enters the cracks, the softness, the spaces you once thought made you unworthy and declares them holy. Suddenly you begin to see everything through new eyes. The same life now illuminated by your openness. You realize the miracle was never elsewhere. It was always hidden in the moments you overlooked. The breath you're taking now, the silence between these words, the invisible intelligence that wakes you each morning without alarm or instruction. These are not small things. They are the sacred whispering through the ordinary. This awareness deepens until even your struggles become sacred. You stop labeling them as wrong and start honoring them as rites of passage. Each challenge becomes a chiseling, shaping you not into someone new, but into someone true. You begin to see that what you once called pain was in fact an answered prayer for awakening, not punishment, but purification. And in this space, forgiveness blooms, not just for others, but for yourself. You begin to forgive yourself not for what you did, but for forgetting who you were. You no longer carry shame for the ways you tried to survive. Those were sacred attempts at wholeness, born from innocence. You bless them now. You bless the version of you that did not know better, and you welcome the one who is beginning to know. This is what it means to be reborn, not in body, but in being. Not by going somewhere new, but by meeting this moment without resistance. And this moment, this breath, this heartbeat is enough. There is nothing missing. There is no one else you must become. There is only the quiet invitation to rest in what island, to sink, not into apathy, but into the deep trust that what is unfolding is not against you, it is you. It is your own soul, returning piece by piece, light by light, through the doorway of surrender. Then we continue, not as seekers chasing some distant summit, but as those who have begun to realize that the mountain itself lives within us, that every step taken inward is a step taken home. As this remembering expands, you begin to live in rhythm with something that doesn't hurry. You no longer race the clock or the world's expectations, for you have felt the sacredness of stillness and no longer confuse motion with meaning. You stop measuring your life by what you've accomplished and begin measuring it by how deeply you've met each moment. You find yourself less interested in achievement and more drawn to alignment, not with goals, but with grace. And in this grace, your very perception shifts. Where once you saw problems, you now see invitations. Where once you felt fear, you now sense a threshold. The darkness that once seemed so foreboding begins to reveal its purpose, not as a void, but as a womb. A place where old versions of you are laid to rest so something more whole can emerge. Not more impressive, not more perfect, but more true. The old paradigm dissolves the belief that life is a battle, that worth must be proven, that healing must be earned. You see now how those beliefs were never yours. They were adopted, inherited, absorbed from a world that had forgotten its own divinity. And you, in your sacred bravery, are now remembering for us all. This is not a light remembering. It is not all bliss and peace and ease. It is a deep, soul-anchored awakening that sometimes aches as much as it enlightens. For to awaken is to feel it all. Not to bypass pain, but to welcome it without making it your identity. Not to escape discomfort, but to hold it until it reveals the light it was guarding. And the light it guards is always the same: love. Raw, unconditional, unearned love. You begin to see that love is not a possession to be won, nor a reward to be traded for perfection. Love is the very breath of existence, the current that animates all things, and your only real task is to stop resisting its flow. Even now, it moves toward you not because you've finally done enough, but because you were always enough. With this realization, your relationship to life changes. You stop praying for escape and begin praying for expansion. You no longer ask for the storm to end, you ask for the eyes to see its purpose. You no longer beg for peace, you become a sanctuary for it. The world does not have to soften for you to be soft. The chaos does not need to cease for you to be still, because you have found a stillness that is not dependent on circumstances, a peace that is not conditional, a love that is not transactional. This is the soul's sovereignty, the freedom of one who has surrendered not in weakness but in wisdom, who has laid down the armor not because the battle is over, but because they've realized they were never at war. And now, as you walk this new path, not forward but deeper, you begin to carry a different frequency, one that doesn't demand attention but commands presence, one that doesn't seek validation but offers reflection. Your presence becomes a mirror in which others remember who they are. You become a living invitation to return, not return to doctrine, not to dogma, but to essence, to the purity of being, to the quiet, unshakable truth that there is nowhere you must go, no standard you must meet, no image you must maintain to be worthy of love. You are the beloved. And in surrendering to that truth, not once, but over and over, you become the embodiment of what the world needs most, not another expert, not another savior, but another soul at peace with itself. And so we continue like a river guided by gravity, not needing to force its course, but trusting its own descent into something vast, something boundless. As your inner surrender deepens, you begin to feel the weight that once clung to your spirit, lifting not all at once, but in soft layers, like fog dissolving at dawn. And what emerges from beneath that fog is not a new you, it is the real you, the eternal one, the one who was never touched by failure, never diminished by doubt, never truly hidden, only temporarily forgotten. You begin to laugh again, not because everything is easy, but because you are no longer resisting what island joy, once a fleeting visitor dependent on external events, now rises from within like a wellspring that doesn't need a reason. Peace becomes not the absence of struggle, but the quiet confidence that you are held, even in the midst of it. And love is no longer something you seek. It is the atmosphere you walk in, the breath that surrounds you, the essence you've begun to remember as your own. This remembering transforms not only your inner world, but the way you walk through the outer one. Your conversations shift, your choices soften. You stop speaking to be heard and begin speaking to offer truth. You stop moving to be seen and begin moving to express presence. The striving fades not because you lack ambition, but because your definition of success has changed. You no longer measure life by how far you climb, but by how deeply you root. Rooted in what? In now, in truth, in the sacred simplicity of being. And in this rooting, you discover an authority that is not loud, not forceful, but undeniable. The authority of one who has nothing to prove. The quiet power of one who has touched the infinite within themselves and no longer needs the world to agree. From this space, forgiveness flows not as a task, but as a byproduct of presence. You forgive not because others have earned it, but because you no longer wish to carry what was never yours. You release the past like autumn leaves, not out of apathy, but out of reverence for your own freedom. And as those old identities fall away, the one who was wounded, the one who was wrong, the one who wasn't enough, you feel lighter, not because you've lost something, but because you've returned to something. Your innocence, your stillness, your divinity. This is not the return of the person the world taught you to be. This is the return of the child who looked at the sky with wonder, who trusted without fear, who loved without condition. That child never left. They were buried under expectations, under roles, under wounds that were never meant to be carried. But now, as you surrender your grip on who you thought you needed to be, the child reemerges, not as a memory, but as your original face before the world told you to wear another. And you see now, clearly, that every part of your journey was sacred. Every detour, every heartbreak, every silence, it all led you here, to this breath, to this being, to this knowing that nothing needs to be added for you to be complete. You are not on your way to wholeness. You are peeling away everything that made you forget it. And in the final embrace of surrender, you no longer fear what's to come. You no longer grasp at the future or resist the unknown. You become available to life. You walk in trust. You rest in the arms of the infinite, knowing that this surrender is not the end. It is the beginning of a life lived from truth. And now we are here. This is the end, but only in form. For the journey of surrender is not a destination, it is a way of being. It is the practice of returning, breath by breath, to the divine stillness that has always lived within you. You are not who you were when we began this journey. You are not even someone new. You are more you than you have ever been. And that is everything. The moment you surrender, the universe embraces you. And now it has. And so at Island, there's a space beyond all striving, beyond all proving, beyond the ceaseless noise of trying to become. It is a space not far away, not hidden, not reserved for the few, but quietly dwelling within you, waiting not to be earned, but to be remembered. This space is the sacred dwelling of your truest self. It is the space of divine possibility. To live from this space is to step into the rhythm of the infinite, to no longer be tossed by the winds of doubt or fear, but to be carried by the current of divine intelligence that breathes galaxies into existence and hums silently in the beat of your heart. You were never meant to manufacture worth. You were never sent here to gather love like breadcrumbs scattered by the world. You were meant to awaken. You were meant to remember that you are already what you seek. There is no lack in you. There is only the illusion of separation. The ego will have you believe that your value is a currency to be earned. That if you do enough, become enough, shine bright enough, maybe, just maybe, you will deserve to feel whole. But wholeness is not a prize at the end of a performance. It is the starting point of your existence. You were born from wholeness. You are made of wholeness. And nothing, not a single moment of pain or misstep, can erase the divine signature that has been etched into your being. You are not here to climb some cosmic ladder toward your worthiness. You are here to come home to the still space that has never judged you, never asked you to be anything other than yourself. The space that whispers, you are enough, now, not later, not when, now. And what is this divine possibility? It is not a destination, it is a state of being, a surrender, a remembrance. It is the courage to stop grasping at identity and instead become the spaciousness behind all identity. It is the willingness to let the false fall away so the truth may emerge not in thunder but in silence, not in grandeur but in grace. When you live from the space of divine possibility, you are no longer bound by the roles the world has cast you in. You are not the anxious mind nor the weary body. You are not the story of your past or the projections of your future. You are the timeless witness to it all, the presence beneath every name, the light behind every eye, the song that sings even when there is no sound. You do not have to understand this fully to be transformed by it. You only have to allow. Allow yourself to feel the breath as a miracle, to see your own reflection and recognize the sacred, to speak from a place that needs no validation. That is living from divine possibility, not through effort, but through alignment. You are not created to be small. You are not molded in the image of fear. You were spoken into existence by the same source that spins the stars. And that source lives in you, not as a tenant, but as the architect. The world may tell you to shrink, to stay safe, to color within the lines of expectation, but the soul, your soul, is not here to conform. It is here to expand. It is here to dissolve the walls of separation between you and the infinite, between you and love, between you and the God that lives in your very breath. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life?" And so I ask you, why live in the prison of fear when the gates have always been unlocked? Why deny the call when the very longing in your heart is proof that what you seek is already planted inside you? Living from divine possibility is not about never falling. It is about falling into grace. It is about standing in your imperfections and knowing they do not diminish your divinity, they illuminate it. The cracks are not flaws. They are the entryways through which the light floods in. You are not broken, you are breaking open. You are not behind. You are unfolding at the exact pace that the universe intended. There is nothing to rush toward because the miracle is not in the destination, it is in this breath, this heartbeat. This moment where you let go of needing to be anywhere other than here. The Tao teaches the way to do is to be. And when you allow your being to bloom without restraint, you step into the flow that carries all things effortlessly. You no longer fight the current. You become the current. You no longer seek to control life. You begin to dance with it. And in that dance, miracles are born not because you begged the universe, but because you aligned with its rhythm. Not because you demanded life to change, but because you changed the way you saw life. The eyes of divine possibility see not with judgment, but with compassion. They see the frightened child within every angry word, the longing behind every act of control, the aching desire for love behind every mask. And in seeing this, they do not harden, they soften, they forgive. They bless. You begin to realize that everyone is doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they've reached. And so you let go. You let go of the need to fix, to convince, to fight for your place, because you remember your place was never at risk. You belong, not because you earned it, but because you exist. You are the miracle walking, the divine wrapped in skin, the infinite made tangible. And when you live from this place, not sometimes, not when it's easy, but as a daily practice, you no longer wait for life to give you permission to shine. You shine because it is your nature. You give because you overflow. You love because that is what you are made of. To live from the space of divine possibility is to bow to the unknown and trust that it knows your name. It is to no longer resist the unfolding, but to meet it with curiosity and reverence. It is to see yourself not as a seeker, but as a revealer. Not a wanderer, but a wellspring. Not a broken soul trying to be fixed, but a luminous being remembering the truth. The truth that you are enough, that you always have been, that you always will be. And when the noise returns, and it will, when the world pulls at you with its demands and doubts, come back. Come back to the breath. Come back to the silence. Come back to the gentle voice within that knows your worth is not up for negotiation. Come back to the space of divine possibility and live there. And so we continue deeper still, not as though we travel outward, but as though we sink inward into the infinite depths of the soul that has been patiently waiting beneath the noise. Imagine for a moment a vast and boundless sky, not the sky above, but the one within you. This sky is not disturbed by storms. It does not mourn the passing clouds. It simply holds everything sunlight, thunder, silence with the same unwavering embrace. That sky is your essence. That sky is what remains when the roles dissolve, when the striving ends, when the masks are gently laid down. To live from divine possibilities is to stop measuring your worth with the ruler of the world. It is to begin trusting what the world cannot see, but what your heart has always known. You are not your reflection. You are the light by which that reflection is seen. And this light, once remembered, does not flicker in the face of darkness. It becomes the beacon. It becomes the truth that walks into every room long before your body arrives. There is a stillness that arises when you stop arguing with reality, when you stop trying to bend life to your will and instead open to the mystery of what is unfolding. The stillness is not inactivity, it is sacred participation. It is choosing to meet life not from the armor of fear, but from the softness of surrender. Not a weak surrender, not a giving up, but the holy surrender that says, I no longer need to control this moment in order to trust it. And trust, in its highest form, is not a belief that everything will go your way. It is the quiet knowing that no matter how things unfold, the deeper current of life is always carrying you toward greater wholeness, even in pain, even in uncertainty. Especially in those moments when the ego shouts that you are lost, trust becomes the whisper that says, this too is part of your awakening. When you live from divine possibility, your identity is no longer tethered to outcomes. You no longer define success by applause or recognition. You begin to realize that real success is alignment. Real fulfillment is authenticity. It is speaking words that echo your soul, not your strategy. It is taking steps that feel like truth, even when the path is unclear. And the more you live this way, the more you realize that you are not here to fit into a world that forgot how to breathe. You are here to remind it. Not by preaching, not by performing, but by being so deeply rooted in your truth that your presence becomes its own teaching. A silent invitation for others to remember who they are too. There is a divine intelligence that beats your heart without permission, that grows the trees without effort, that carves canyons with rivers that do not rush. And that same intelligence is in you, not around you, not above you, but in you. It does not need to be reached, it only needs to be trusted. So many spend their lives trying to become powerful. But the soul is not interested in power as the world defines it. The soul seeks presence, it seeks truth, it seeks connection. And from that sacred ground, a different kind of power emerges. Not the power to dominate, but the power to bless. Not the power to control, but the power to transform. You begin to bless everything, not just the joy, but the pain. Not just the clarity, but the confusion. Because you understand now that all of it is sacred. All of it is part of the curriculum of your becoming. Every heartbreak is a teacher. Every delay is a purification. Every detour is a redirection toward the truth you were always meant to live. This is not spiritual optimism. It is spiritual maturity, the kind that no longer needs life to be comfortable in order to feel meaningful. The kind that finds beauty not just in blooming, but in falling leaves, in empty fields, in the naked winter of the soul. And when you stand in that kind of faith, not blind faith, but embodied trust, you become unshakable. Not because you never feel fear, but because you no longer believe it defines you. Not because pain never visits, but because you no longer resist its arrival. You learn to meet life with open hands, knowing that nothing real can be lost and nothing untrue can remain. To live from divine possibility is to see with new eyes, eyes that look upon the world not with judgment, but with wonder, eyes that recognize that behind every face is the same presence, the same light, simply wearing a different costume. And so you soften, you forgive, not because the other deserves it, but because your soul cannot carry the burden of resentment any longer. You forgive not to let them off the hook, but to free yourself from the prison of the past. You let go, not to forget, but to remember who you are without the weight of old stories. And in that release, you rise not above others, but into yourself. And so we continue deeper into the river of remembrance, where every bend reveals another truth that was never hidden, only overlooked. There is a sacred humility that arises when you stop trying to be extraordinary and begin to honor the sacredness of the ordinary. It is here, in the seemingly mundane, where the divine speaks loudest in the sound of your breath, in the warmth of sunlight on your face, in the still gaze of a child who has not yet learned to wear a mask. Living from the space of divine possibility is not about escaping this world. It is about inhabiting it so fully, so truthfully, that the veil between heaven and earth grows thin. You do not need a temple to touch the sacred. You need only the willingness to be present, fully, courageously, nakedly present. The present moment is not a stepping stone to something greater. It is the gateway to everything you seek. And yet, how often do we bypass it in search of a better now, a more acceptable version of what is? But you see, this moment, this unpolished, unfiltered, raw reality is not in the way. It is the way. Every breath is a prayer. Every step is an arrival. There is no need to rush toward enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a finish line. It is a dissolving of illusion, of resistance, of the story that says, I am not there yet. Because the truth is, you are not on your way to becoming, you are on your way to remembering. And what you are remembering is that the divine is not a destination, but your origin. And from this remembrance, a new kind of clarity emerges. You begin to see that every time you dishonor your truth to fit in, to be liked, to be safe, you are turning away from your own sacredness. You begin to feel the ache of self-betrayal more deeply than the fear of rejection. And so you choose differently, not because it's easy, but because it is real. Realness is the soul's language. And when you begin to speak it, you no longer care if your truth is misunderstood. You no longer measure your worth in the currency of approval. You speak not to be heard, but to echo the voice of your spirit. And in doing so, you liberate not just yourself, but everyone who witnesses your freedom. The soul does not want more achievements, it wants more aliveness. It wants to feel the wind against your skin, to taste your food with reverence, to dance without choreography, to cry without shame. It does not ask for perfection, it asks for presence. The more present you become, the more miraculous your life begins to feel, not because the circumstances change, but because your eyes have changed. To live from divine possibility is to live with eyes wide open, ears tuned to silence, and a heart unguarded. It is to trust the invisible more than the visible. It is to choose peace, not when life allows it, but when your soul demands it. It is to become a sanctuary in a world that has forgotten its sacredness. And you, dear soul, are that sanctuary. You are the still point in a spinning world. You are the lighthouse in a sea of storms. You are the breath of God in a human form, not because you've earned it, but because you are it. No matter what the past has told you, no matter what shame is whispered, no matter what the mirror has reflected, you are and have always been a holy vessel, a living testament to what is possible when a soul chooses to remember its source. So let yourself remember now, not with the mind, but with the body. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw soften, let your breath slow, and feel in this very instant that you are already home, not in a place, not in a person, but in yourself. Yes, let us go on, deeper, slower, not as a journey with steps, but as an unpeeling, a revealing like watching fog dissolve from a still lake at dawn. The lake was always there. So was the depth, so was the silence beneath the ripples. And now, as the inner fog begins to clear, we see with greater softness what has always been true, that within you is a well so deep it touches the infinite, a place not of becoming, but of being. And from this well, life begins anew, not outwardly first, but inwardly, as a subtle revolution. This is the quiet uprising of the soul, not one that seeks to overthrow, but one that seeks to reawaken. You are not here to conquer the world, you are here to re-enchant it, to touch each moment as if it were laced with God and an island, even the moments that bruise, even the ones that confuse, especially those, for they are the sacred riddles sent not to punish you, but to draw you closer to the center of your own being. And when you arrive at that center, when you surrender to it, you do not find answers. You find awareness. And awareness, my love, is the seed of all transformation. You begin to see that healing is not the reversal of pain, but the embracing of it. That awakening is not an escape from the mess of life, but a deeper immersion into its mystery. Do not fear the mess. The mess is sacred. It is the soil from which your compassion blooms. It is the clay the divine uses to sculpt your tenderness. Every brokenness, every uncertainty, every tear shed in silence is not a flaw in your journey. It is part of the design. You are not off course. You are being carved. The Japanese speak of kintsugi, the art of mending broken pottery with gold. They do not hide the cracks, they honor them. And so too must you honor the places within you that have fractured, not as weaknesses, but as the golden lines of grace, the evidence that you lived, that you felt, that you were courageous enough to let life touch you. There is a kind of strength that does not roar, it does not push, it does not need to prove, it simply stands open, grounded, unwavering. This is the strength of the soul, aligned with the divine. A strength born not from control, but from connection, not from certainty, but from surrender. You do not need to know what comes next. You only need to remain faithful to the presence that is breathing you now. And presence is not a technique. It is not something to practice once a day. It is a way of being. It is the sacred act of bringing your full attention to this very moment, this sacred now, and declaring it enough. It is bowing to the mundane with reverence. It is brushing your hand across your own cheek and feeling it as the body of God. Do not overlook the small. The small is where the divine whispers. The small is where the infinite hides. In the way your chest rises and falls like the ocean. In the way your eyes soften when you speak truth. In the way the wind seems to listen when you finally grow still. These are not coincidences. These are sacred convergences. And when you begin to live like this, from this awakened attention, your life no longer belongs to fear, it belongs to flow. Decisions are no longer calculated, they are sensed. Movements are no longer forced, they are inspired. You begin to live not as a reaction, but as an offering. An offering is the highest art of the soul. You are not here to take from life, you are here to be a portal through which life gives itself. Not in depletion, but in overflow. You give not because you lack. You give because you are full of presence, full of peace, full of the quiet remembrance that your life is not your own. It is a thread in the great tapestry of existence. And when you see it this way, everything becomes sacred. You eat with gratitude, not consumption. You speak with care, not noise. You listen with your whole being. You love without needing to be loved back, because the love you give is no longer a transaction, it is a transmission of truth. Let this truth soak into you like warm rain on dry earth. Let it soften what has been hardened. Let it wake what has been sleeping. You are not here to get life right. You are here to live it true. And truth does not ask for perfection, it only asks for presence, for integrity, for the gentle courage to stand in your soul even when the world around you demands otherwise. And yes, there will be times when the world does not understand this kind of living, when your stillness confuses those addicted to speed. when your depth unsettles those who fear their own. But that is not your burden to carry. Your task is not to be understood. Your task is to be real, to be rooted, to be a living reminder that peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of authenticity. And so we walk further into the stillness, not with haste, but with holy reverence, as though every step were upon sacred ground because an island. Not a ground made of stone or earth, but the ground of your own being, which has held you through every season, through every fall and rising again. You may not have always noticed it. You may have been swept away by storms, but the ground was there. Unshaken, waiting, whispering. To live from divine possibility is to finally hear that whisper. It is to attune your ear to the sound beneath sound, the hum beneath the hum. The still voice within that does not argue or shout, but simply says, yes, you are that. You have always been that. And when you listen, truly listen, you stop seeking permission to be yourself. You stop asking for validation from voices that don't know your soul. You rise not with pride, but with certainty, with the quiet power of one who remembers. And memory, in the deepest spiritual sense, is not about the past, it is about eternity. It is about recalling the timeless part of you that existed before fear, before doubt, before the first time you were told you were not enough. It is a homecoming to the self before story. And that self is not separate from God, it is an extension of God. You are not a visitor in this universe. You are its child, its expression, its mirror. When you weep, the stars do not turn away, they lean in. When you rejoice, the winds join your laughter. When you doubt, the divine does not retreat, it draws closer. Because it knows your doubt is not rebellion, it is longing, longing to remember. Let that longing be holy. Let it be the fire that keeps your soul warm on nights when faith feels faint. Let it remind you that desire itself, pure, untainted desire, is not a flaw, it is a compass. The pull of your own spirit guiding you back to alignment. And what is alignment if not the deepest yes? The yes to your truth, the yes to this moment, the yes to the mystery of not knowing but still walking. It is standing in the river of life with arms outstretched, not to control the current, but to merge with it. To say, I trust this flow, I trust the intelligence that carries me, I trust the unfolding, even when I cannot see where it leads. This is not passivity. It is not detachment. It is the fiercest kind of engagement. To live without clinging, to love without grasping, to create without fearing. When you live this way, the ego loosens. It is no longer the master, it becomes the servant. No longer a jailer, but a translator. It begins to serve the soul, not silence it. And the soul, oh, the soul, it does not rush. It is not impressed by your resume, your titles, your accolades. It does not care how many people follow your light. It cares only that you do not forget the source of it, that you do not dim it in fear or distort it to please. The soul thrives not in spotlight, but in sincerity. So you return again and again to sincerity. Not a forced honesty, but the kind of natural truth that emerges when you no longer perform. When your yes means yes and your no is holy. When your silence is as articulate as your speech. When you are not striving to be spiritual, but simply being what you already are, a living prayer. And prayers, when lived rather than spoken, become movements of grace. Your life becomes the altar, your breath becomes the incense, your presence becomes the offering. And the divine, which once felt far away, begins to show up in everything. Not because it was absent, but because your awareness has become present. You begin to see the sacred not just in sunsets in Scripture, but in traffic and tears in the grocery clerk's eyes. Everything becomes a portal. Everything begins to shimmer with the light of inclusion. You no longer divide the world into spiritual and secular, holy and human. You see that it is all God, that everything belongs. And in this belonging, you are softened. You stop needing to prove your goodness. You stop measuring your growth by how much you achieve. You begin to measure it by how often you return to the heart, by how gently you treat yourself when you fall, by how honestly you show up when life gets messy, because it will. Messy is part of the masterpiece. It is how the paint drips when the brush dances freely. It is how the clay cracks just before the form emerges. Do not curse the chaos. It is the space where new life stirs, where the old self crumbles so that the truth can rise. Let it all in. The doubt, the joy, the grief, the laughter that comes too soon, the silence that says more than words. Let life touch you deeply, for that is how it teaches. Not through theories, but through experience, through contrast, through presence. And when you live this way, your life begins to speak, not with noise, but with resonance. Your energy precedes you. Your love lingers in rooms you've left. Your presence becomes medicine not because you try, but because you are aligned, because you have returned. Yes, we have walked this spiral together, not as a ladder with rungs, but as a sacred unfurling. Each word, each breath, each turning inward has not brought you somewhere new, but has peeled away the veils from where you've always been. And now, as we near the final notes of this sacred remembrance, there is no crescendo, no climax, only deepening, only quiet, holy descent into the ground of your being, the space of divine possibility made real. This is not an end. It is the breath that comes after exhale. The pause before beginning begins again. And here, in this pause, you find what the world cannot offer: peace without a price, love without condition, truth without disguise. This is the final remembering that you were never on a journey to acquire. You were on a journey to surrender, to shed, to let go of all that is not you, until only the radiance of your true self remained. The self that does not fear silence, the self that does not chase validation, the self that stands without needing armor, because it knows it is always known that it is clothed in the fabric of the eternal. You were never meant to impress, you were meant to express. You were never here to compete, you were here to contribute. And not by doing more, but by being more you. The most authentic, unguarded, luminous version of yourself. The one who laughs from the belly and forgives from the marrow. The one who dances even when there is no music, because the music is within. And yes, the world will still swirl, the winds will still rise, but you, anchored in the spaciousness of divine possibility, will not be carried away. You will breathe, you will bow, you will bless. Because you have become the stillness you used to seek. You have become the answer you once chased. You have become the home you believed was far away. This final return is not a destination. It is a way of being. It is the sacred art of living with your soul in the lead, of letting your words be dipped in presence, of letting your gaze be one that sees not just form but essence, of letting your love be so wide, so unguarded, so deeply rooted in truth, that others remember who they are just by standing near you. And this is the miracle, this is the grace. When you live from the space of divine possibility, you do not need to fix the world. You need only to radiate the truth of your being, and the world begins to remember itself. Not because you changed it, but because you changed the frequency from which you relate to it. And so, beloved soul, live now, not tomorrow, not when the stars align or the wounds are gone or the world applauds. Live now from the center of your being, from the stillness behind your eyes, from the infinite sky that has always been your soul. Walk softly, speak truly, love wildly, forgive quickly, and hold nothing back that is meant to be given from the wellspring of your spirit. You are no longer seeking the light. You are the light. You are no longer looking for a sign. You are the sign. You are no longer trying to become. You are, and that, dear one, is enough. That is everything. That is living from the space of divine possibility. And now you remember, and now you are free.